Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 59 of One with the Films. This is us doing a live taping of the episode. We're talking about Silence of the Lambs. So we're going to go ahead and get straight into it. Okay, when you're ready.
Alrighty, everybody. Good morning. Step closer to the sound of my voice. Closer. Ah, there we are. I surmise by you being here that you are either a cinephile with quite distinct opinions about films and a desire to hear others share theirs, an avid Star Wars fan, or a random chipmunk who stole this phone. You should probably give it back before I find you. Welcome to One with the Films, and this podcast can be quite a fun ride if you have the right guide. I am your humble, enigmatic, nonchalant white man with a touch of danger, and I, too, enjoy a nice Chianti. But before you meet my co-host, you will need to know a few rules. Do not touch his hair. Do not mention his height. You pass him only compliments, no passive-aggressive comments or sarcasm. No mentions of The Last Jedi or Rian Johnson. Only use letterbox reviews. No exceptions. Do not accept any conversation he tries to engage you with. Do you understand me? I'm going to show you a reason why we insist on such precautions. On the afternoon of July 8th, 2024, he complained of chest pains and was taken to the dispensary. His mouthpiece and restraints were removed for an EKG. When the gothic nurse bent over him, called him a good boy, and asked him what was wrong, he monologued at maximum volume about The Last Jedi for 2 hours and 43 minutes. The doctors managed to reset her brain chemistry, more or less, and save one of her eardrums. His pulse never got below 122, even when he talked about Canto Bite. Goblins and ghouls, may I introduce Naf.
For all these reasons and many more, I absolutely should be in prison.
For sure. Absolutely. I think there's an argument that could be made that whenever we start to get known, it's going to be because one of us ended up in prison. They're like, well, where did this get, like, you know, where did this start? And they start to see our serial killer like tendencies via the podcast that we willingly posted on the internet. Yeah,
like there's 59 episodes now of essentially evidence that can be used against us. So that's exciting. That's really exciting. But thank you for the wonderful intro. And
absolutely.
Yeah, welcome to our listeners. I'm really excited to get into this one.
It's good to see you again. It's good to see you being on here and doing this. I couldn't anymore. You pulled a Michael Scott of being like, what are you doing this weekend? And I'm like, oh, well, not much. And then you're like, oh, cool. So you can come on the podcast. And I went, shit. And but that being said, Neff, don't you know that, as a reminder, you can find One with the Films on any podcasting platform of choice? Did you know that?
I actually didn't. No, I had no.
You didn't?
No concept.
Well, then,
of this.
Guess what? We're live on demand right here, right now. And if you are in the live chat, please feel free to join in on the conversation. We always love to hear from you. And if you're listening on demand, don't worry, we still love you, just a little less. But nonetheless, that being said, Naf, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what we're doing here today?
Hell yeah, baby. It's an episode of the Weekly Watch List. And the Weekly Watch List is what happens when people like us have lots of films that we want to show one another, but the other person just doesn't like listening to the truth. You know, you tell them, hey, you're going to love this movie, and they go, and it takes them like a year to watch it. So we fixed that problem by making a podcast where we kind of force each other to do it. Now, naturally, that hasn't been working all that well the last couple of weeks, Keegan. Because you haven't been here.
Fair.
And so my evil plan to make you watch movies, it's just failed. So, but bar that, it usually will work pretty well. For the uninitiated, the shtick here is that for every episode, we've got somebody watching somebody else's favorite film for the first time. Yeah, and we come in, we talk about it. It's all about giving creators and people just like a space to talk about the art that they love and give us like a space to talk about why they love it so much as well, which is always fun. So if you guys love listening to a bunch of nerds geek out and force each other to watch and then discuss their favorite films, you can feel free to follow or subscribe. You send us to your friends, and if you like, you can also activate notifications so you never miss a new episode. And of course, we're on all your favorite socials as well. Links in the description below. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what we're doing here. So then, Keegan, question for you, my boy. What is a brilliant film that not enough people, namely me, have seen? Because you're our guest today.
That is true. I am the guest. I am the star in the spotlight, the shining ray of sunshine. And to answer your question,
you are one out of 3 of those things.
That works. And so I'll take 1 out of 3.
Guest.
But here's the thing. An underrated film that, while a lot of it is still iconic, but one that I think enters into the echelon of, because it's so iconic, people assume it doesn't necessarily, like, they know everything that happens. They know everything that's there. And that is Silence of the Lambs. 1991, baby. Jonathan Demme directing. Wonderful landmark horror film that really changed the game.
And this is one of the first ones that, like, us talking about films and me talking about some of your favorites, like, this was one that came up a really long time ago. We've known each other for a few years now. And we always kind of anticipated putting this one on the podcast. So we watch a lot of movies together. You know, every couple of weeks we'll, like, hang out and just watch something. And it worked out that we got to watch this one together last week. So, like,
yeah, last week.
It's really great, right? My question for you, though, why this film? Like, maybe in one sentence, why is this film one that you wanted to show me and all our listeners?
Absolutely. And in a most likely a run-on / compound sentence, I will say that this film combines what's brilliant about gothic fictional horror attacking us with what we fear in the dark and the darkest parts of us, while also confronting us with a very real reality, that basically saying that that's not always fictional. And I think that that's why this film is so brilliant.
Hell yeah. And what was your, like, how did you come to find this film? This is 1991. This is well before you were born.
Yes, very much so. When I was younger, my mom and dad, obviously big cinephiles, and very much they enjoy a lot of films. And at some point I started to, get fascinated with horror and fascinated with, kind of scary movies, and started looking up, like, iconic horror villains and things like that. And Silence of the Lambs kept coming up, whether it was Buffalo Bill or Hannibal Lecter, obviously. And I asked them about it. I was like, oh, can I see Silence of the Lambs? And my mom was freaked out by this movie when she saw it. And I do think that, for a lot of reasons that the film goes into, I think it affects a lot of femme viewers, more so than obviously male, because a lot of it is very understandable as to how this went down. And, a lot of the scary shit that happens very much is it's where it hits a little too close to home. But because of that, I was actually told for a while, it's like, oh, it's going to freak him out. It's going to really mess him up. Like, he can't see this. And so I think I was
going to eat a human with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Exactly. I think she was just worried that I was going to have nightmares for months, and which only made me want to see it more.
Classic.
And then at some point, it was back when Netflix was still doing, like, mail-in DVDs and shit like that. And I remember asking, like, I got to, like, I think I was like in 7th, 8th grade, something like that. And then it came the day where we got Silence of the Lambs on Blu-ray, like, coming in that little package. And my dad was definitely like, hey, today's the day. And so we finally watched it, and ever since then it's just kind of sat in this brilliant space of just, like, some of my favorite films, where I really think about it every time I go back to it. It really there's just something new to appreciate about it. And I'll get into more details of what I love about it. But Nav, tell me what you knew about this movie going in, because you hadn't seen it before we sat down and watched it this week.
Yeah. I knew really nothing. Because you know me, like I've not been big on like gore and horror that much. Like I've grown to appreciate like thrillers a lot more. But still, like gore and horror is something that I tend to like not dive into too much. Though I am.
It's not your vibe, yeah.
Yeah. But I think that what I realized over my experiences of dipping my toes in a little bit more is that, like, funnily enough, my perception of what all of these films were is very different than what they actually are, like horror films and stuff.
Precisely,
like that,
yeah.
So I'm working through the Scream films right now. That's my spooky season kind of fun, and it's like it's not that bad. It's not like built up in my head is so much worse than what it actually is. So like going and watching these films and realizing there's a lot of what's the word? Like a lot of like value in here, you know? So like I didn't know much. I'd seen a couple of scenes because you know me, I like to dive down the YouTube rabbit hole. I watch lots of video essays, I watch lots of like people talking about what makes films work. And naturally with this being something that has done remarkably well, critically and commercially, as we'll get into shortly, there's a lot to talk about in here. And so there were some scenes that I had seen. I'd seen like a breakdown of the introduction of Hopkins, which is Hannibal, played by Hopkins, which is a fantastic scene, which you referenced in the intro as well. But like beyond that, I hadn't really seen much else. Literally just like that scene is all that I had kind of known about. And so, yeah, same deal. Like it probably was something that while I've been looking through a lot more classics this year, I probably would have gotten to, but I've held off waiting to watch with you so we could do it for the podcast. And I'm so glad that I did because it was a great watch with you and a great film in general too.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where I think this film did at the time and continues to, I think it opened up a lot more critical acclaim and respect for the genre of horror that I think up until this point, historically with film, had been a lot more closed off, and it didn't have the same respect that it kind of does now. But as we get into that, Naf, do you want to educate us a little bit? Tell us some fun facts as we dive into this film.
Yeah, cool. So I've got a couple of things here that I've put together. You can feel free to add some stuff on at the end if you like. But film's directed.
For sure, I will.
Yeah, it was directed, produced by Jonathan Demme as a screenplay by Ted Talley, and it's a chilling adaptation of Thomas Harris's gripping novel. Had a pretty modest budget of only 19 million USD, pretty classic for like horror films, and it grossed an astonishing 272.7 million USD worldwide. Huge, huge gross. It's starring Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, Scott Glenn, and Ted Levine. It's a psychological thriller that premiered on the 14th of February 1991, a Valentine's Day film. It's rated 8.6 out of 10 on IMDb and 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and it delves into the minds of its characters, exploring themes of manipulation and fear, and it's enhanced by an iconic score. Dan was captivated by the characters, especially the lead villain, I say in quotes, leading to a film that masterfully balances horror and intimacy. Foster's audition left a lasting impression, and the screenplay underwent several drafts to create an edge-of-your-seat experience. Who could forget the chilling line, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti." It's so good. It's so good.
So good.
Foster actually won an Academy Award for Best Actress, and Hopkins took home Best Actor, so it's making it one of only 3 rare films to sweep the top 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The moth used in the film's iconic poster symbolizes transformation and darkness, and the prison scenes were filmed in an actual federal penitentiary, and it's a film that keeps you thinking long after the credits roll, for years and years and years in your case.
Absolutely. And wonderful fun facts as always. Again, you always are so good at pointing out all these things. There are a couple of interesting things with this film. For a while, Gene Hackman was initially going to direct and star as Hannibal Lecter.
Lex Luthor?
Lex Luthor was going to do that. And when we do Unforgiven, you will know him very differently. And but nonetheless, but at some point he just felt that the script was too dark and he had to leave because it was just taking too much of his mental wherewithal doing that. And what was interesting about this film is while it is such a dark film, apparently the crew had a lot of fun working on it. It was like a lot. The set actually was remarkably light at times. A lot of jokes around set and things like that, and even the relationship between Ted Levine and I'm blanking on the actress who plays the woman that was abducted. Let me see if I can get her name real quick. Brooke Smith. Brooke Smith and Ted Levine, who plays Buffalo Bill. A lot of people would ask him, was that intense? Was that horrible? Like, did you walk away like feeling like really, disgusted with each other?
Did she kill your dog?
Like, exactly. And a lot of like was asking, especially Brooke Smith, did like that affect you psychologically? And she was like, no, actually it was very calming because I just got to scream on set for all this time. And I just would walk away very like, very it's just kind of very therapeutic. And they had a lovely relationship. And what was actually funny was apparently, and I don't know how true this is, I remember Jodie Foster giving an interview about this, so I'll take her word for it. But apparently Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, due to the way the set was built, they have the glass wall in between them. Well, that was a hard thing to remove. So they couldn't, like, between takes and setups, they couldn't always take it down. So for a lot of filming, they were on opposite sides of this area. They would kind of keep to themselves. So for a lot of the shooting, they actually were not interacting. They were actually very much and at some point they were scared of each other. And then towards the end, when they started doing like press junkets and shit like that, they would meet up, and at some point she was like, I was terrified of you. And then he goes, I was scared of you. And then just being like, so they both had that kind of mutual respect for each other and fear for each other.
The basis of every good relationship you'll ever have in your life. You should be a little scared.
Absolutely. And I'll get into more fun facts as we go on, but one of the more interesting things, and this is a shout out to one of our other episodes, 2001: A Space Odyssey with Artur. One of Anthony Hopkins's main inspirations for Hannibal Lecter was Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter. And
my second pun on his name. Hannibal Lecter,
correct.
And
Hannibal Lecter, and Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
And so, but now the thing about it was he loved how chilling Hal was, and he felt that playing Hannibal Lecter more in that calm, alluring, the way Anthony Hopkins talked about is, we all want to know what's at the end of the hallway. We all want to know what's at the end of a dark hallway. While we're terrified, we all want to know. And he wanted to kind of reflect that. And he felt Hal was a great example of just the good morning, Dave. Like the very calm, cool, understated. And so that's what he tried to replicate to whatever degree. And that famous line that you quoted, that bit at the end where he does the was actually him trying to make the crew laugh. It was not intended. It was not scripted. It was nothing. But Jonathan Demme thought it was so cruel and so scary that he included it in the film. And now it's obviously an iconic moment.
It's funny how that kind of stuff happens.
I love it. I always think that shit's great. But yeah, that's kind of it.
Cool.
But before we go any further, all these conversations obviously are not spoiler free. In fact, we're going to be spoiling some very big points of the movie, especially one scene, which I think is one of the greatest scenes ever created in cinema. It's definitely one of my favorites. So we're not doing necessarily a play-by-play, but we are talking about the film with the expectation that you have already seen it. It's always cool to go and watch the film and check back later. Just make sure that you do check back later. But even if you haven't seen the film, chances are we'll finally convince you to make that jump. And if you want to know what film to watch in advance so you can come in prepared for next week, links are in the descriptions below for all our socials, so you can check us out there. And if you listen all the way to the end of today's episode, we'll also be revealing our next film and guest right here. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Wicked. Now, like, one of the things that stood out to me basically straight away from this film is every character piercing into my soul directly. Like the way everyone is spiking the lens, and I called it out to you. I was like, "There, this is odd, right? All these people are looking." And you pointed out to me that, like, like we're meant to be her, and it's uncomfortable having people look at us the way people look at her. And this singular decision is one of the greatest additions to a cinematic experience that I've had in my entire life. I was like,
and I want to ask you about that, like with it, because I don't know, I found it to be very simultaneously vulnerable and violating, but also very intimate. Did you feel the same way? Did you feel like kind of like, how did that affect? Because it's a very simple trick, but like, what do you think like about that feeling in that whole thing?
Well, it definitely touched on the like autistic fear of being perceived. It's like, don't look at me right now. I'm blending in. I'm not different. Okay.
Hey man, you got to stop that shit. I know you're telling me not to touch the glass, but you can fuck right off right now.
It reminded me a lot of in the show Fleabag. There's a scene in which, like in the second season, where we introduce Andrew Scott as the hot priest.
Yeah.
You've got our main character Fleabag, who's constantly like breaking the fourth wall and like looking at us and talking to us and keeping us involved in what's going on. And there's this little moment where she kind of turns around to talk to us, and he's like noticing she kind of disappears for a minute.
Yeah.
And so she turns around to look at us. He's like, "What was that? Where did you go?" And he kind of literally just looks down the lens, and it feels like, as you said, like you feel very vulnerable for a second. Like, "Oh no, why are you looking at me? Don't look at me." Like you're not supposed to know I'm here. It's like I'm here. What? It's me and her, mine and her secret. You're not supposed to know that I'm here. It's like you realize that I'm there, and it felt very similar to that at the start. But as you said, there is like, it keeps you very like engaged in the film. Like I said, as you are kind of like a part of it. So I think that the intimate's a really interesting word for it, and I would agree that I felt that quite a bit. Quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and I agree. Like one of the things upon the rewatch that we were talking about as we were watching it together was that cinematography choice. And what I loved in the beginning that you caught, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that's exactly what they're doing, is when they are having you look down the lens, they do a reverse shot to Jodie Foster, but she's looking slightly off lens. And that's how I feel like, oh, well, we're not supposed to identify with the people looking at Foster. We are Foster, like we are Clarice. And that's why it's like, it's just slightly. And then I think there's one moment when she is talking to Hannibal Lecter where it's like they actually are looking down the barrel of the lens. And it's that first time where we are both the perceiver and the perceived.
Oh yeah.
And I think that ultimately this film does so much subtle shit right, where you and I talked about this when we did like Schindler's List and a couple other films since then. But when I think of Best Picture, there are times where you and I will talk about this, where there is a film that comes out and you're like, okay, this film is 75% direction and 25% like these other departments, or like one department is just working a little bit more than everyone else, like not in a bad way, and the rest can be great. It's just like one department is clearly the standout. But when I think of Best Picture, it truly is what films, like, was everybody on an even playing field because everybody was just at the fucking top of their game. And this is one of those movies where it's like, yes, the direction is great, but the direction benefits from the screenplay, but the actors deliver it so well that you're drawn to the dialogue, but you're drawn to how it's said. But then the editor is coming in with just these great little choices and just how the film is weaved together. And I'm like, that's what makes a Best Picture win. And there's no wonder to me this film won all 5, making a huge statement in the field of horror. And also keeping in mind, at this time period in history of the Oscars, there were only 5 nominees. And what's also interesting is the fact that this film was released in Valentine's Day. That's a lot of the year for this film to have to stay in people's minds to get back to the Oscars come in the next year. You know, that it's one of those things that that they talked about it, that we were one of the few nominees that was like already on VHS by the time the nominations came out. And it's insane in that regard that this film had the staying power that it did.
Yeah.
And
I think that goes to show, like we said in the facts before, that it does stick with you and keep you thinking after the credits roll. And it's one that I think is a really easy one to go back to and watch again as well. Even though like the subject matter is quite heavy, it's like, it's really good and it's really snappy.
Yeah. It's a movie that I think that we were talking about. It's like, you don't even feel the time passing. Every moment is worth your time. Every little thing, like every moment doesn't really overstay its welcome. It doesn't there. And I'm just continuing with you because obviously cinematography sets the tone and sets all this stuff. And I'm curious with you, like, because we were talking, you would point out, it's like every shot is like picked so perfectly. There would be moments where it's like, it even would be like, we're in this same setup of just her talking to him and it's across this wall. But you would just comment like they still film this so differently that it keeps you engaged, even if you're in this familiar environment. And I want to know more about your overall thoughts of experiencing the tone of this movie.
Well, it's funny, like on one of the previous points you're talking about as well with Hopkins and Foster, and where they have that scene where they're looking back at one another too. It's funny, if you look at the IMDb page for Silence of the Lambs, the screenshot that it has to show off the trailer is of Hopkins looking at Foster, but one of his eyes is looking at her and one of his eyes is looking at us. I don't know if you noticed that, and it's so creepy and unsettling, and it obviously fits the character so perfectly too. You know, like you don't know where his mind is at throughout the whole film, and that makes it really, really interesting. There are so many. Miley's in chat but hasn't seen Silence of the Lambs. Spoilers then. But there is so much in here because we get all kinds of different like sets as well, right? We've got the beautiful outdoor like forest, like woods that Jodie Foster's running through, and you've got obviously the prison or the penitentiary sequences. You've got like Buffalo Bill's house with the section with like where the moths are all in, and like and then you have your dark alleyways and everything. And so there are so many films that kind of balance all of this out really well too. But I found it wild the amount of variety that you have visually while still keeping a consistent visual tone.
Yeah, well, and even that kind of goes to a point that we'll more dive into later. But what I love about it is this film does a lot for, I think, a variety of horror fans and people that are not a fan of horror, that I think it combines the gritty realism of like an actual manhunt for a serial killer. You know, like it actually like takes, that what would it take to actually hunt down a person like this? And it really gets you in on that ground level of thinking about the details and thinking about the clues, the autopsies, this and that, while it also has the dramatic Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter kind of almost heightened reality of being like, you have this cannibal who was a psychologist who like ate his victims, but he's a very refined man, a man of purpose, a man of great artistic appreciation, has clearly been cultured and has all this. And it's so fascinating that shouldn't work, but it does. Like it shouldn't work to have this kind of Buffalo Bill gritty serial killer mixing with this, I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice kid. Like it shouldn't work, but it's the perfect combo.
Yeah. And it's it definitely has to do, like, the film is absolutely a sum of all its parts, right? And we've got cinematography by Tak Fujimoto, who people may know as the cinematographer of The Sixth Sense as well. Also worked on the camera and electrical department in A New Hope as well. So
really?
worked on Star Wars in the early days. And obviously this is 20 years later. So like Star Wars: A New Hope's one of his earliest like works, and he's kind of worked his way up through there. And then did cinematography for Silence of the Lambs, then came back, did it for Sixth Sense a bit later. But it's edited by Craig McKay, who also edited Philadelphia. And I didn't know this actually, but edited one of my favorite films, Sin Nombre, which is one of the ones that you've seen too.
Oh yeah.
And we've got production design by Christy Z, who did production design on Goodfellas, The Departed, Revolutionary Road, The Comedian. So many films, and particularly like we were saying before, the production design in this is outstanding.
Oh, incredible. And just to see like the work there and how clever they were, like I remember a big
thing that
they
were sequel as well, Red Dragon.
That tracks. And but it is very interesting as well because of the fact that her production design is a really incredible thing, because I remember them talking about the choice to make the glass cell, because they were worried with the bars, like of traditional prison bars, being covering up too much of Anthony Hopkins' face. They didn't want this effect of just you seeing parts of the face obscured. So they were like, oh, what if we did glass? But then the sound department was like, okay, but if you do glass, how are we gonna hear him? Like, how are we gonna, because it would just be, now Clarice, we're going to like, and that's why they were like, well, what if we do it like you would like poke holes in a like in a jar when you're capturing like a butterfly when you're a kid. And so that's why they have like the little holes above and the little holes below, being like it's literally just a practicality thing. But then it led to great moments like him sniffing the air through those little holes. And it's like, it's just so creepy.
Yeah.
And it's just,
I didn't realize.
And then it's obviously
Ridley
been
Scott
imitated in.
Too.
Oh, which one did he do?
2001, Hannibal. Also
oh, shit. Ridley Scott did Hannibal?
Yeah.
Damn.
Huh.
All right. Well, there we are. But yeah, like, I guess, well, and like, question for you, Nav, more on the story aspect of things. Like, I kind of want to know just your experience with just the story that was being told to you. Like, what was your feeling on it? Like, I know that I love just the idea of, again, it's kind of now become a thing of like, oh, a serial killer helps you catch a serial killer.
Yeah.
But at the time, this was the thing that made that happen, you know? And it's such, I don't know. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that whole idea.
It is an interesting experience, as you said, like having seen this story a bunch of times and then coming back to this, you know, and seeing it as like the origin. And again, like I'm watching a lot more classic films this year, and it is wild seeing old stuff and feeling like it was inspired by new stuff just because of how I've seen it. But even so, there are so many moments in this, because it does take you for a bit of a wild ride. Yeah, like and there are so many moments in here that still are shocking, while also, it's like I was talking about a Seven Samurai with you the other day, because I got to watch that for the first time recently, and I was saying how like there aren't really any like shocking plot twists, but it didn't make me feel like that wasn't a bad thing. You know what I mean? It's like at a certain point, you've seen enough films, you can kind of get the idea of where things are going. There's a moment towards the end of this film, in like our main villain is kind of trying to plan like a getaway, and I feel like as those pieces were being laid, like I instantly knew exactly what was happening there. But it was less of a, well, that sucks, I knew that wasn't clever, and more of a, oh, you guys did that so damn well. Like that.
Well, and it is such an interesting thing, because I remember when I saw this the first time, I remember overhearing like a friend of mine talking about this movie, and I heard something like out of context, like about him wearing someone's face and being like, and I was like, oh, like, and I thought it was from like one of the sequels or something. And then when they got into the thing, I was like, oh, that's from this movie. And then it's just, as I said earlier, it's like, that is one of my, and again, big spoiler for anybody, that's one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema, is the Hannibal Lecter escape. just because of the music, the tension, and how ultimately nothing happens, in a sense of like nothing scary really happens, except maybe you could argue that first little moment of they open the doors and they see the guy fucking cut up.
Yeah.
And it's that, and it's also kind of a thing where I feel like for a lot of this movie, we know Hannibal Lecter is a bad guy, but we kind of become endeared to him. We kind of find him charming or alluring or interesting. And then that whole moment of, it's like, whenever you were ready, Sergeant Pembry. And he just sits down, and then the music cue when the handcuff goes around the guy's wrist. And it's just that moment of he's loose, he's loose, he's loose. And everybody just like him going over, and he just starts eating the guy's face. And then just like taking the pepper spray, getting him, takes the baton, just starts beating the shit out of the guy. And then all of a sudden just standing there.
You remember he's the villain for a moment.
You remember like, oh, there's a reason this guy's a fucking insane, or not insane, but you realize there's like a reason this guy's locked up, and I feel like it's almost the audience gets a betrayal moment of being like, fuck you, man. I liked you.
It's funny that you say that too.
Yeah,
it's also like, as you were saying before, you were talking about how just after that, it goes back to the music cue. And I was thinking on that a little bit, because as you were saying it, it kind of clicked to me that I was like, and this is something literally just in the last few seconds, I was like, excuse me, wait, what? And it's like Kingpin in Daredevil.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you could smash someone's face in a car door and then sit there looking at White Rabbit in a snowstorm with your beautiful like music playing in the background. I think particularly it's
exactly that.
I think it's in season 3 where he's in prison and you have that shot of the white prison wall. It's like panning back and you're like, oh, White Rabbit in a snowstorm? No, it's a prison wall. And he's sitting there eating his crappy eggs thinking that it's like it's
something like this is his palace, this is his
so good.
It's well, and that's it's that kind of duality that this film does so well, whether it's down to the script, how they filmed it, the direction, the acting. It's like it's the duality of that character, I think, why he remains to be one of the ones that just sticks in our memory, is just that 1 minute. Again, they tell you at the beginning of the film, as you talked about, like the iconic scene that everybody breaks down and talking about how this guy's not a guy to be trifled with. This is a dangerous man.
Yeah.
This is a person who literally, like this woman who we joked around about in the opening intro, but like that idea of like a nurse like was going to give him the EKG and he fucking like ate her face.
Yes.
But his pulse never got above 180, like never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue. And it's that shit where, and then you're not even introduced to this guy yet. And then the minute you're introduced to him, it's that good morning. And it's that brilliance of kind of similar to how later in the film, Buffalo Bill lures the girl into the van with the couch. It's kind of like we're lured in by Lecter being like, oh, he's not a bad guy. It's not a bad, like, could a bad guy do this?
There's something.
Would a bad guy be this polite?
There's something that's even more terrifying about it too, because that scene that we're talking about, and again, it's one of my favorites as well. But the way that it's like, he's kept at the end of the room because he's the most dangerous. And as you walk through the room, you're seeing it all ramp up. This is one of the most clever uses, one of the most cleverly filmed sequences I've seen like ever. And as he's walking through the room, we're seeing the first kind of what's his name, the first prisoner, the first criminal, and he's a little creepy. And the next guy's a little crazier, the next guy's a little crazier, and the last guy before Hannibal is the one who's yelling out this like vulgar, horrible shit. And then we come around the corner, and the whole time you can kind of see that she's looking at, oh, where's he going to be? And it's building up in her mind an our point of view shot of like, okay, that's creepy. And, oh my God, where's he going to? And as we come around the corner, he's just sitting there. It's creepy, but it's not like scary or vulgar or anything like that, like it's, and then you have the follow-up sequence of that where there's a scene in between that we don't really see on screen, but it's, oh, he's not be saying much of like anything anymore. Like his tongue is gone, or he choked on his tongue, or whatever it was. I forget, but he felt that he had no decorum. You know, that he that he was disgusting, and so just for the sake of that, he's killed the guy in the cell next to him. It's actually so messed up.
Absolutely. And it's such an interesting thing when you really see it, especially with that, because they also mentioned, oh, we put a chair out for you. So in the minute you see that hallway, you know where she has to get to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this, and it's terrifying because also she has to understand that I have to play the head games where I cannot show fear around these other guys because that's going to affect Hannibal.
Yeah.
And even with the whole thing that they really are, you know, the way that they talk about it, it's a very fascinating build up to that.
And Francis in chat said that there are some exceptions like Kemper and Bundy, but most of them had very low IQs. And you do kind of see that in this film too, where you've got like Buffalo Bill doesn't seem to be that intelligent of a person, you know, like it's, and there's of course like other commentaries to be made around his like how he's portrayed in the film, but
which well, we can talk about that interesting story, but finish your point.
Yeah, no, but it's just like, it is interesting that like essentially you have like two polar ends of the spectrum. You know, you've got one dude who like seems like he's the smartest guy in the room, and the other guy who, you know, he's trying to make a woman suit, you know, like it's
well, and a guy that's like, it seems like it's almost inevitable this guy will get caught. Like this guy is brilliant in some ways, but like kind of not. It's like, it's hard to tell. It's like, are you getting lucky, or are you like kind of, you know, are you
talking
like what's the way?
Yeah, you were talking before about the scene with the couch and how he gets her into the van with the couch, and I was watching that and I was like, you like clever bastard, like it actually like that was really smart, you know, like
that was one of the scenes that freaked my mom out so much, because she was saying she's like, I would be that person.
Yeah.
I would be the person that would offer to help. And who wouldn't? You know, you see this guy with a busted arm, a part of you's like, the poor guy, let me help. Like that's what serial killers did. Serial killers would prey off of, you know, human kindness, like to whatever degree.
It gives you like that fear of the human race, you know? It's of the unknown. It's like when you are walking alone at night, or there's no one around. It's funny. I went and saw The Substance a week and a bit ago, and I left my car parked at the shopping center where I was working at, right? And I didn't realize that shopping center car park closes. And I went and watched the movie. I finished the movie. As I was walking back to the car, like my phone died in the theaters. It was really low battery. I had a long day at work, so my phone was dead. I'm walking back to the car park in a suburb in Melbourne that is actually notoriously not safe. And I'm like, this is wild. I can't get into the shopping center because that's closed. I'll go around and I'll walk down the car park entrance, and the car park is locked. And I was like, I can't call anyone.
Oh no.
There's like no one here. Like if something would have happened to me, people would not know.
That would be all she wrote.
And luckily, because this place is not very like safe, the police station was not too far. So I walked to the police station, and I'm sitting in the police station going, hey, can you guys charge my phone so I can like call my partner to come get me or whatever? And they didn't have a charger for my phone. And they're like, look, we've called security. You can go back to the place and they're going to be waiting for you. You just got to go to this little place right here. And I'm like, I don't have a map to know where I'm going. I think I know what you're talking about. But I'm walking through dark alleys and stuff to get back to this little entrance, and the security is waiting for me to open the door. And well, I got there and security wasn't there straight away. So I was sitting there waiting for 10 minutes, and there were some people doing some unsavory stuff in the corner, and I was like, this is it. I'm done.
Yep, this is
and
where
having watched this film only a couple of days earlier, I was a bit like, oh my god. But Francis in chat again said that Kemper's the most intellectual serial killer. Bundy was okay, but not that advanced mentally. And if you look at Ed Kemper interviews, you would never expect his deeds. And also agrees that Silence of the Lambs is a great movie. And Ridley Scott's Hannibal was visually slick as well.
or too slick, I think is a little
I
bit
can't tell
more.
if it's a knock on the film or if it's like it was too slick. It was too damn good.
Sure, absolutely. So, Francis, if you want to clarify that in the comments, but nonetheless, the thing with it, and I think Francis does tap on something here, especially when this film came out. The talk around serial killers was very much in the public mind. I think a lot of it also came out because obviously this is based on a book. This wasn't an original idea. I think a lot of that came around that time, keeping in mind that a lot of around this time period between, I think, the 80s and 90s, for those of my true crime people, please correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the kind of more famous serial killers, that was kind of when a lot of this shit was really happening. And so I know that this movie was kind of also on that peak of that conversation. And that's also, I think, why it's a very nuanced movie in that regard too. Which also does leave a point that is very interesting with regards to you touched on it a little bit, and we talked about it when we were watching the movie. The perception of Buffalo Bill at the time was a little controversial.
Yeah.
Because this was around the time period of the AIDS epidemic, and a lot of stuff with regards to LGBTQ rights and LGBTQ representation was starting to become really forefront in the public eye and the public mind. And one of the big outcries with this was that Buffalo Bill, in a lot of people's minds, even though I would argue that I don't think the film does portray him as, oh, he's doing this shit because he's gay or because he's believes he might be transsexual or things of that nature. And nonetheless, people felt that Buffalo Bill was kind of being like, oh, LGBTQ people are killers and they're insane and they deserve to sort of be locked up. And there was a lot of protests around this, which a lot of the production crew tried to hide that stuff from Jonathan Demme because they didn't want him to take it personally, but he ended up seeing something and he took it to heart. He felt very saddened that was a lot of the things that people took away from his movie, because that was never his intention. And the next film that he made was Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington's Philadelphia, which is about a man who is affected by the AIDS epidemic and was fired on the basis of the fact that he was gay. And now people were trying to, I don't know, frankly, enough about the court case, and I have not seen the movie. So hopefully somebody brings that on the podcast so we can watch it. But it was cool to know that he took the success of this movie, heard the outcry, and was like, you know what? There's validity to what these people are saying, even if he disagreed. And I feel like that there is a lot of, especially in our modern age, I feel like people are quick to double down on their own shit instead of being like, you know, point taken. A lot of people will be like, oh, you just don't get it. And then it would be like, and I like the fact that Jonathan Demme took this and heard it and then used that to create a movie that is very well respected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the other things that was on your mind that stood out in this film to you is in the craft side of things, like particularly the edit for this film. And one thing I wanted to add before we dive into that is this film features a score by Howard Shore. And I love that.
Howard fucking Shore.
I love that Peter Jackson probably watched this and was like, the guy who did the music for this, he's the one that should write Concerning Hobbits. This is, he should create the music for The Shire. That's the guy. That's the one.
You know, the guy that made you feel so unnerved by movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, this guy should give you the most some of the most triumphant themes and peaceful, beautiful themes that have ever been created.
That's the one.
I still cannot believe that Howard Shore was not nominated for an Oscar for this movie. Because, like, I get it. It's not one of the most iconic themes, but it just works so well.
Oh yeah.
You know? And it's one of those things that and to your point with the edit of this movie is so clever because it's just the best way I can put it is it's perfect. It's just the edit of this movie. No shot
Seamless.
is too long. No shot is too quiet. Like there is the one shot that, and there would be times where your ADHD and autism pattern recognition would annoy me because I was like hoping that they would get you. And then there'd be moments like when they're showing up at Buffalo Bill's house, and then the minute they start the scene, you're like, they're the wrong house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, shit, because that's such a well edited scene.
Yep.
And because like the whole thing of, if you have seen the movie, you haven't seen the movie, the whole thing of them editing this whole way of Buffalo Bill, you see the SWAT team ringing the bell, and then the bell rings down in the basement, and it's just racketing up this tension. You see them and they're so prepared. They're ready to fucking get this guy. And then he goes up, puts the gun in his belt, opens the door. Hi, I'm looking for a Mrs. Landry. And then all of a sudden the SWAT team bursts in.
Yeah. And like, there's no one here.
I do think it's so funny. One thing I do feel is, well, apparently actually to two things. One is in the edit initially, there was a mistake, or at least the editor said it was a mistake when they
said it was
were doing
perfect.
like one of the final. Well, but because they changed this thing, but he was so initially it was a mistake in, I forget if it was like the test screening version or some version that they were doing where they actually flipped it the wrong way, where they had the SWAT team bursting in before the Jodie Foster reveal. And then they flipped it around, and I don't know what would be better ultimately. I do think that I'm like in the right circumstances with less autistic viewers, it probably works very well the way that it is.
I feel like it's like we were saying before, right? It's not even necessarily the neurodivergence that does that for me. I guess it's also partly just having seen lots of films and seeing other films that were inspired by these editing choices. And so like, you know, even down to, I don't think he does it the same sort of way, but like even like the first series of Fargo, I was just thinking about now, they have a similar scene of like the setup, and it's not edited between different houses or anything like that, but almost the way that it lays out all of the pieces. It's very much taken inspiration from this. And we got a few more messages from Francis in the chat as well, saying Ridley Scott's Hannibal, we're talking about Ridley Scott's Hannibal, sorry, but not that they think that Hannibal was bad, but that in fact it portrays one of the most extreme scenes Hollywood has ever authored, in which one of the characters is eating their own brain. Hollywood would never film that scene. That's wild. I can't even picture that. Other than Scott's often quite nihilistic version. So, I mean, look at the Hollywood remake of Spoilers. I'm not sure.
Spoilers?
Not sure what that film is. Or the current Speak No Evil remake, No Dare. Scott at least dared to transgress, and yeah, like he's known for that. He goes balls to the wall, you know, like
whether you like it or not, he does go that route.
Yeah.
It's
and so a lot more films lately too. I'm interested in Gladiator 2, mostly for Pedro Pascal.
You mean Sexy the movie?
Yeah,
like I still love that Gladiator 2 is basically, I still maintain that I think the casting director was given the challenge, bring me the sexiest male actors you can. And then they were like, okay, we're going to go for every generation sexy. Literally. And we're going to go, and they're like, of all sexualities, they're like, we're going to go with Joseph Quinn from Stranger Things, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal, fucking Paul Mescal.
There's this poster that they had at the IMAX in Melbourne too, which is, I don't know if we can see it properly, but it's a Gladiator poster. And right in front of it, they have a poster for T-Rex 3D. And I sent this to one of my friends and I was like, look, there's a T-Rex in Gladiator. It just looks like it's all one
great
poster.
Oh yeah. But nonetheless, back to this, it's as you're saying, yeah, like the editing is just so clever. Also, like how they tell the story, and it's very simple. It's very, again, it all just blends in. It just helps everything feel so real and so organic. The one thing back to that scene that I do think is funny is How did Jack Crawford immediately know that Clarice is in danger? In theory, he just sent her on a mission to be able to be like, oh, hey, like, can you go interview these people? Because we do want to try this as not a hostage taking, but we want to try him for murder. Can you please start just going into the town and start to like gain, knowledge of this shit? And then immediately knowing. But I also think that speaks to his knowledge of Clarice's skill, is being like, of course, fucking Clarice is probably at the place where we're supposed to be right now. And just being like this just wild ass guess almost. And I do think that that's kind of funny. But goddamn, it's just, and we also talked about how when we were watching the movie, how the movie, it has a decent sized budget for films of that day. But at the same time, it's like they really go for this kind of grounded, they made all of the grounded shit look really cool and edit. Like we were talking about, like the SWAT team going up the stairwell. It's like you could have done that with like a crane going down or something like that, but just this kind of the way they all were moving, it felt so, I don't know, like The Raid or like some of these other films like Sicario, where you really focus on more the details rather than kind of painting with this broad brush of it. It's why it's like, it still feels, whenever I think Silence of the Lambs, it doesn't feel like a detective movie in the sense of like, I feel like there's a lot of detective movies where that's just the backdrop. I'm like, no, this is actually like really nitty gritty a part of this movie.
Yeah. And I like that, as you said, the film was very focused on the details too, like all of the moments in the film, if that makes sense, like those standout moments, like they are these small things, it's like we're in the elevator and there's a little bit of blood dripping from the top. It's not over the top.
Yep.
It's just a little bit of blood. It's like, oh, it reminds me of like Raimi's first Spider-Man, where he's on the roof and the blood comes down.
Yeah.
And again, it's probably taken some kind of inspiration from there, the blood dripping from the roof. I don't think I've seen any other film bar those two. Like there are all these little things like that. And again, in terms of inspirations and things that come from this later, you have the cage in the middle of the room in the hotel, and you can look at like a Suicide Squad later and like Harley Quinn being in that same sort of setup in the prison. It's like the cage in the middle of the room. Like so much visual inspiration has been taken from this for so many other films later on. Weirdly enough, I'm realizing now, like lots of superhero films have been inspired by this. Like visually.
A lot of them. Yeah. And I mean, it's hard not to be when this film just does so much good in that regard. Like even stuff that I'm sure was in the script, like one of the ones being her giving the offer to Lecter, but you see Chilton listening to the tape later. And it's like, oh, we know obviously this is a little out of sync. He's not listening to it live, but it's that moment of like, it just conveys everything we need to know. It's like he heard it. And that's like, it's just a brilliant way of handling that to keep the story going without really trying to be too caught up in it, Yeah,
absolutely. And it's like all of these things that make the film stand out. Like, as we said, like it swept the Oscars. Yeah, like all of the things it was nominated for, one in particular, all the 5 main categories. Not many films have done that. And I believe no horror film before or since has been nominated.
Certainly. Well, I don't know about nominated. I believe that there are well, definitely none have won. Like I think Get Out has been the one that has had the most recent chances at doing so. Like obviously it won Best Original Screenplay. I think that was the one that had the biggest chance to kind of repeat a Silence of the Lambs winning streak. The only Oscars that it didn't win was for Best Sound and Best Film Editing, ironically. It won the rest, which was writing, directing, actress, actor, and Best Picture. Famously, Anthony Hopkins is, I believe, holds the record for the least amount of screen time for a Best Actor winner.
Really? Yeah.
They say, I don't know how true this is, but I was trying to catch it like as we were doing our rewatch, but I believe he's famously only in the film for 17 minutes. And now I can't tell if that's just when he's visually on screen, like you're only counting the amount of time that he's actually seen. Which I would imagine that's what they're doing, and not scenes that he's in. But famously, he is one of the shortest.
Yeah. So I've just found an article here. So 12 actors who earned Oscar nods for less than 20 minutes of screen times. And Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs, 16 minutes. Anne Hathaway, Les Miserables, 15 minutes. Dan Niven, Separate Tables, 15 minutes, 38 seconds. Ingrid Bergman, Murder on the Orient Express, 1974, 14 minutes. Ruby D, American Gangster, 10 minutes. Where are we? Judi Dench, Shakespeare in Love, 8 minutes. Where are we? Okay, so Hermione Baddeley, Room at the Top, 1959, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. She won the Oscar for her performance in this movie. Best Supporting Actress.
That's insane.
2 minutes and 20 seconds of screen time. Also in chat, thank you, Francis. We really appreciate the really kind comments. And yeah, as you can see, this is 59th episode. So if you do enjoy this, there's a lot to go back to. Like we're usually running this podcast together, but every couple of weeks we have we alternate between us showing each other movies and also bringing on guests and friends that we've made over this time. So as you go back, you may see some other faces that you might know that have come. And if there are films.
Absolutely. And if there are films that you want us to talk about more, please, we have a little thing in the bottom that you can submit and just talk, so we can talk about some of your favorite films.
And there's the letterbox link in there for all the films that we've watched for the podcast already too. So if you want to watch along, it's all there.
There's plenty for you to go back and watch.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's insane how little screen time Anthony Hopkins actually has, but he feels like you listen to that and you're like, that can't be right.
Yeah,
that can't be right.
Like he's
he's so magnetic.
Exactly, that's kind of the word I was looking for, because I was like, he just stands out so much that even in this like 2-hour long film, it's 17 minutes, but it feels like he's there the entire, like his presence. That's the word that I needed. Like his presence is like omniscient. You know, he's in every scene. Does that make sense? Like he's literally
even the moment after his escape, when he's out of the movie for so long, you are like, and a part of the movie does, because it's at a perfect moment, because it does kind of leave Clarice in the lurch, where it's like, okay, the guy that had it is such a interesting thing where it's like this, you know, trying to regain my train of thought here. Give me a second. It's like that moment where once he leaves, you do get a chance to focus on Buffalo Bill, and you are leaving like, you know, Jodie Foster in the lurch. You're leaving her without like her key to solving this thing, even though he has said, like, and if you rewatch the movie, he's right. Like when you really listen, yeah, the answer is right in front of you. And which is that, you know, he's nearest to the one that like was the first one.
Yeah.
And I love that at the end, just when you've forgotten about him, just when you've kind of forgotten about Hannibal Lecter, you're like, oh, we're with Clarice. She's now a part of the FBI. She's all this stuff. And then all of a sudden getting at the end and just hearing, have the lambs stop screaming. And you're like, nice fuck, he's still out there.
Yeah.
And I love his line of, do not bother with the trace. Like, I'm not going to be on long enough for you to do so. I have determined that the world is more fun with you in it.
And I love the line just following that. I'm having a friend for dinner. It's
and
so
you just
cheeky.
see Chilton. Like, oh. You see Chilton. You're like, fuck.
He's gonna eat him.
He's going to kill that man. That is where Hannibal picks up.
Nice.
That moment.
Sick.
Yeah, I don't know the rest of the movie. I just know that's where it starts.
Yeah. Francis was saying about Frank Langella being really Shakespearean in the 80s He-Man movie. And then also around like Predator, like in the original Predator film, like he's only in the film for 2 minutes, but it's just that.
Absolutely.
That staple, you know?
You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
And it's okay, Francis. Don't worry about shitty typing, because like Kay over here sober can't type. So
I can't read. It's
yeah, but
I don't know how I've been like I just am trusting NAF to give me good information. I really don't know what you've been saying this entire time, but
like top to bottom, start to finish, this film is phenomenal. Every aspect of the craft in this film, down to the fucking poster. Like, look at this poster on the left. This is
an iconic
stunning.
poster.
This is stunning, and we haven't even talked. Like, there's so much more that you could dive into here around like themes, and those sort of like visual motifs around like the moth. Like we said in the fun facts, you know, this is about like
the moth is about transformation.
Exactly, like death and transformation and evolution, and it's wild. But I think that one of the things that stayed with me long after the film left was that feeling of uneasiness, in which it's not even like necessarily the main characters that much. Like, you do feel it a little. It's a little interesting with the like police chief, and when Anthony Hopkins is talking with Jodie Foster, and they're having these kind of like, you know, POV spike the lens stuff. But it's not even those that are the most scary scenes. It's when she walks into the room full of cops and the guys on the side are like eyeing her up and down, gawking her. It's actually fucking filthy.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, Francis, this poster is a work of art. It really is. And also,
absolutely,
this film has so many aspects of it that are timeless. And one of them that I was thinking about just before, as I was appreciating the poster, is it's the way that the text is all lowercase, no capitals. This is very common right now with the younger generation. They don't use capital letters anymore. So these guys, they were cooking. They knew.
Yeah, they knew. And but even to your point about it, like one of the a couple of things that I need to that I really want to emphasize is especially from Jodie Foster's point of view, I really want to kind of talk about that ending, right? Where one of the great moments of, and where you do kind of see Buffalo Bill's a little bit of him starting to have almost a Hannibal Lecter moment. If Jodie Foster wasn't already used to Hannibal Lecter's way of thinking, I feel like this could have gotten someone, but he's talking to her about being like coming in, like, do you want to come inside, do this whole thing? And he's like, I think I got her card somewhere. I think that and he's talking and he's like, so have the police like found anything, you know, fingerprints, stuff like that? You guys got any leads? And like just playing dumb, but like trying to see if they know it's him.
Yeah.
And then she sees
he's not
the
as
moth.
dumb as you think, you know, like.
Yeah, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about that, like it's like he has his moments of brilliance, and
couch scene,
you hear it, and it's like it is, and it's just like, and then you look at that. But one of my favorite moments is her just seeing the moth and him saying, like, yes, sir. Yeah, that's very, very good. You could just see in her head going, fuck. It's
the unbuckling of the
gun.
Yeah, and like not taking the gun out, but like that cheeky little, you know, like I'm ready. And again, there's those moments. One of the most horrifying sequences in the film is when the lights are shut off and he's got the night vision goggles on, and she can't see anything. And that
was one of my favorite reactions that you had.
Dude,
that was one of my favorite. Like, I remember you saying, like, when we were watching that part, just going, fuck. And just because it dawned on you what was about to, because also what's great is they gave at the beginning, and I don't know if these night vision goggles make this sound, but I can understand, even if for literally these two moments, this is why this movie was nominated for best sound, is that moment of the like, I don't know if they make that sound, but the way that they just make that distinct sound the first time you see them, and then they're never in the film again for a while, and then all of a sudden they're in the basement, your mind's totally elsewhere, and all of a sudden just you hear the
it's,
and you're like,
iconic,
and it's before you see the green. It's just they let the sound play first. And to your point with that whole sequence, what I love, and again, going back to editing and shot selection and cinematography, is we talked about this as we were watching, and I'm like, notice how we're never fully in the room before she is.
Mm.
So we're never like a step ahead of Clarice. We're never, jumping like it's such an interesting I don't know, just such an interesting way of handling that you as a viewer are like, I don't know what's coming around the corner. I don't know what's happening next. And I love that shit.
And Francis shared another fun fact for us in chat too, that the Silence of the Lambs in Dutch is translated as the Scream of the Lambs, which does change the context of the title and of that kind of story quite a bit as well. Which I did love when the title of the film kind of came up, because the whole time I was like, Silence of the Lambs, it sounds like the Grave of the Fireflies. It like,
yeah, something like that.
What is it going to mean? And it's not at all. It literally, the way that he reads her and gets that out of her, of like you heard them screaming, and then you heard the silence, and then you tried to save one. That unraveling of her lore, is something that I absolutely did not expect in the film at all.
Which I think is also what's so interesting about their relationship. And I think it's why part of the reason this film still stays and still tickles the brain is he's just as fascinated by her. Like his whole thing is, I know the answer to this already. I know the answer to what you're looking for. I know that what he's curious about is her, and he'll never give an answer before he'll get her just to that point of being like, her interest is piqued. And then he's like, I got you. All right, now tell me something. And it isn't until that moment where he's like, and she's like, and I just ran away. And then he's like, no. And just like, if you're going to do this, little Catherine's life is ticking, Clarice. Like, just, he is just tempting her the whole time with that moment.
Like the way that he manipulates her through the whole film. It's again, like at the end, we shouldn't be surprised that he's a villain, But there is this kind of like, no, he's trying to be better. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be all right. And again, it is very reminiscent of like Kingpin in that Daredevil series. Like,
yeah,
he's a good guy. So, no,
he's not. People are complicated, and then you're like,
it's like there was an arc of comics that came out a couple years ago called, I think it was The White Knight, and like Joker is reformed. And then he goes and starts putting Batman on blast for all of the things he's doing that's illegal. So it like basically flips the cards a little bit.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, no. Well, Joker is like, I wonder how he's like he's gonna be evil again. He's gonna come back and just stay straight. He just stays straight.
And it is that interesting thing with it. And but Francis, yes, we both Naf and I have seen that film and have very distinct opinions about Alien Romulus. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, kind of, I think a lot of our feelings on it. I know I really enjoyed that movie. I don't know about you, Naf, but you enjoyed it as well,
yeah,
right?
I loved it. I got to check it out in IMAX as well, so it was really cool. It's funny. So we were talking about like the repeat of prior movies, and I think that the couple of things that stood out to me as stuff that I didn't like as much was the callbacks to the prior movie. A lot of the stuff that it does in terms of standing on its own is like, it's really good. It's really fun. It's really what's the word? Like it explores a lot of different ideas in its set pieces. Like particularly like I love the use of the gravity generator, like the up and down,
yeah,
and coming back to that later, like, and floating through and trying to dodge the acid from the dead. So good.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. So in short, Francis, we'll definitely probably try to find another time to talk about it, but definitely very much enjoyed it. But to this point, I think Jodie Foster deserves, again, there's a reason this character is so iconic. There's a reason she won the Best Actress. But one thing I want to talk about before we wrap up, as we kind of get, and we've talked a little bit about it as we've gone along, but I think in kind of wrapping up, one of the things I think is so unique about Silence of the Lambs, as opposed to a lot of horror movies that kind of pick one or the other, this movie tries to do both in the realm of horror, where it goes, here's the reality of these scary ass serial killers and what really happens in the real world. mixed with Hannibal Lecter on a gurney talking to this senator. You know, like it mixed with Hannibal Lecter's theatrical ass nature and, you know, his paintings on the wall, his things like that, like the very theatrical, almost fictional world that Hannibal is.
It's, as you'd explained it before, it's like he's like the mythical version of it.
Yeah, he's almost what when we think the term serial killers, Hannibal Lecter is what we kind of the mythos that we create.
Yeah.
But Buffalo Bill is most likely the reality. And
it's sloppy. It's like it's just any means necessary
a horrible,
to get what
a horrible
he
person,
wants.
like a very human, very real person. Because I think the reason that Hannibal Lecter sticks in the minds more than Buffalo Bill does is I think because Hannibal Lecter can almost be discounted to some degree, where we're like, but there's not somebody like this. There's not somebody out there like this. Like this guy is fiction. And I think we're afraid of Buffalo Bill. Like we're afraid because that guy exists.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's so close to reality that it's unsettling. And then you're exactly right. It's our perception of what a serial killer is and then what it actually is.
And I think that that's what this film opened up the doors of respect for both. Where, and not that like, oh, it like stuff was changed after this movie came out, but it's like I think there's a reason why this movie is remembered for its villains so much and its hero. Like obviously, like Clarice Starling is maybe not as iconically remembered, but it's definitely remembered. And you know, Jodie Foster's performance is just fucking incredible. But yeah, I don't know if you walked away with the same feeling. Oh, yeah. Well, I love when Hannibal Lecter makes fun of that too, and just that moment of, you know what you look like to me? You look like a rube, but you're not one more step from poor white trash, are you, Miss Starling? And apparently that part wasn't also scripted, was where it was scripted, the dialogue, but it was not scripted that Anthony Hopkins was going to make fun of her accent. And he just decided to, and she was like, you fucker. Like just going like, so
but yeah, no, I
that
definitely
isn't Jodie Foster's natural accent. That's like her like trying for this.
Yeah.
But it is just very funny to like have almost, again, I can imagine being on set being like it's like when you and I talk about when I try to do my Australian accent versus you trying to do your American accent, and it's like us.
Why don't you show the audience your Australian accent?
All right, good day, mate. I'll think that we're going to go down to the Barbie and make sure that we're going to just go over there. No, Last Jedi.
Awful.
And
awful.
awful. No, that's a little bit played up. The honest attempt is my where's the butter is kind of my the best way I could try to get into it. It's not good, I can admit that. But
every time you do your Australian accent, I think of The Good Place.
It's truly, that is how I feel too. But then every time you do yours, I think of Benedict Cumberbatch trying to do his.
Yeah, I can see it. But look, one is better than the other. Just putting that out there.
I'm just saying I had the balls to actually do mine. And so so
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. But look,
I know you're
Francis, really happy that we were able to inspire you to go back and rewatch the movie. It's a fantastic one through, which I'm really glad that it's one that I finally ticked off my film bucket list. But we always do love to wrap up with a little game of cinema a la carte, and if you're in the chat, you can play along as well. But as a reminder, this is where we get to show you the best way to experience this film through the metaphor of food. We've each prepared a menu of our own for this week, with this week's film as the main course, along with an entree to start, a wine to pair, and a dessert to complete your journey. So you get to decide which of the set menus you love the most, so be sure to let us know in the comments or in the chat. So first up, Kay, do you want to give us your cinema a la carte, or would you like me to start?
I can give us a start over here. I hate to set you up for, failure, but that's fine. But nonetheless, my cinema a la carte is titled Delightfully Spooked.
Okay.
And this menu is set for those who are, especially this holiday season, trying to find things that definitely spook you a little bit, give you a little bit of that thrill with just, but also stuff that really enriches the palate, but also just kind of just, I don't know, gives you a little bit of a fun, flirty, scary vibe. Uh, and I'm going to start off my appetizer with a dish that does not often get the credit it deserves, but nonetheless is a very, very good dish, despite it being from a restaurant that is not as consistent anymore. But this film is M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. Wonderful scary movie. I always would put it on as a scary movie to watch at like a Halloween party because it has just the right amount of jump scares, but also an engaging plot. And it is very interesting and very clever. I highly recommend it. It's certainly one of my favorite scary movies. And then, of course, our main course is Silence of the Lambs for a nice hearty meal. And then the wine is going to be paired with another one film that we did this year already, which is Psycho.
I nearly picked
just
that
to
one.
have something, a different brand of a similar taste. But just something that goes for, again, that, as we talked about, that kind of realistic scary. That scary that is that, oh my goodness, this could happen. And gotta love it. And then the dessert is going for one of my favorite horror movies ever, one that I rarely rewatch because it does just freak me out, is Blair Witch Project. I think that that's the perfect way for you to wrap up. Obviously, found footage is not for everybody, but going for the original, legitimate found footage film that actually starts you off with this, especially if you listen to all of the press behind that movie and how much they tried to get this to be legit and tried to make people believe this was actually the thing, where the 3 stars of the movie did not even intend to attend the premiere because it would ruin the illusion. So they were not allowed to even attend their own premiere because they were going so hard into this was a real thing that happened. And so those are mine. So just to reiterate, we have for an appetizer is Signs, for a main course it's Silence of the Lambs, wine is Psycho, and dessert is the Blair Witch Project. Now, darling, what would be yours?
I very nearly picked Psycho, but I didn't because I knew it would be on your list. But I'm gonna go with an entree or appetizer. So the title of my set menu is From the Villain's Perspective. Is this fucking play about us? And it's got to do with how the films where the kind of villain or the antagonist takes over the plot. They outshine the protagonist. You know what I mean? That's the vibe that we're going for. Right now.
Okay.
And so we're going to start with a entree or an appetizer of No Country for Old Men.
Ooh, good pick.
Yeah, we have a protagonist kind of, being driven a lot by the story, but we have our villain who is mythical, essentially. Nobody knows of him. Nobody understands how does he survive this. And then that one of the scariest ways that you can end this film is, he doesn't die. He's just
he's still out there.
He's just there. Okay, cool. No, that's how we start.
I just have to live with the fact that Anton Chigurh lives.
Yeah, and then we move on to our main event. I won't call it our main course, but our main event. Okay. We have our liver, which will be Silence of the Lambs. We have our fava beans, which will be Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, a film in which, again, the Green Goblin. This is a horror film.
I respect.
Raimi takes elements of the things he's learned from years of directing horror into this film, and that's what gives it its what's the word?
It kind of gives it its bite.
Exactly, yeah. And actually, this is one of the things that I love about the Raimi trilogy above the other 2 trilogies, where it does feel like, to a certain extent, it's like it has its thing, it stands out as it's a comic book horror type movie, and it has those moments and that bite that I feel like Amazing Spider-Man was kind of missing because it was trying to emulate Dark Knight, and then Amazing Spider-Man 2 kind of was almost there. It had, like it was almost there. And then Homecoming has that trilogy has its sort of thing around them being like teenagers and stuff. But I do look at them as like they feel like MCU films, and this feels like Dark Knight trilogy, and Raimi feels like nothing else on the planet. Like even when X-Men and stuff were coming out at the same time, or Ang Lee's Hulk, it's like it still feels unique. And for our nice Chianti, we will be taking a sip of Alex Garland's Ex Machina.
Ooh, okay.
With Alicia Vikander, where, again, we are introduced to our main character, but the fucking play is not about him. It's about Nathan, and it's about her. It's about her. I forget her name in the film. Ex Machina. Why don't they... Oh, Ava. It's about Ava. She's the one. And then to bring it back around for a nice dessert, we're going to end on a film that shouldn't be number 3 on the IMDb's top-rated list of all time, but is a pretty solid action movie, The Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan.
Ooh, definitely good choice. I was hoping that was going to be on your list.
Yeah, top to bottom, we have No Country for Old Men. We have The Silence of the Lambs as Liver, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1 as Fava Beans, and Ex Machina as our nice Chianti. And then for dessert, we have The Dark Knight.
Very good list. But let us know down in the comments which list you prefer. And if you know anybody who does food content and wants to help us out to actually make these menus a reality, I would be very curious to see them take on this challenge. But nonetheless, Naf, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at Seen by Naf, or among all of our One With The Films socials. And yeah, what about you, Kate? Where can they find you?
Well, you can find me at Movie Man Opinions pretty much anywhere you find your socials. And yeah, thank you all for joining us, especially Francis, a kind of newcomer to the chat.
MVP.
Thank you so much for coming in. And just a reminder to all those listening on demand, you can join us live every weekend, on every Saturday if you're in America, every Sunday if you're on Australian time.
Yes, sir.
And just we're excited to talk with you. We love talking movies and really getting into this. And a final reminder that you can find all links to our individual pages in the description below. And there's even a Google form where you can fill out if you have a specific creator or film that you would like to see on the podcast. You can also find One With The Films on Instagram and TikTok and all your favorite podcasting platforms. But for now, as promised, feast your eyes on the next film of the weekly watch list, and we will see you next weekend.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for watching. And if you did enjoy, please feel free to like, subscribe, leave some comments for us. That always helps us out a lot. We'll see you really soon. I've still got it. Hey, guys. I've been sent from the future. And in the future, time travel has been invented, and then it was immediately made illegal. But I've been sent from the future with a message. It's the message of next week's guest. And here, this isn't a bar of gold bars that's going to keep me safe. This is next week's movie. Oh, this is Looper by Rian Johnson, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis. It's a really cool sci-fi film that came out a few years ago now, and it's going to be an awesome one for us to watch. And the guest, well, it's me. It's me from the future, baby. I'll see you there. You should hold on to this.